When me and my little brother were around the ages of 5 and 6 years old, there was this big push of ADHD, that label of ADHD, get him to take these medications, stuff like that. All over the place I was hearing it. Me and my little brother, we couldn't sit still for an extended period of time. We wanted to run, wrestle, throw stuff, climb stuff. Now, as I've gotten older and having some of my friends who do have kids and seeing the behavior of when they're around that age, to me, that's just completely normal. That saying, let boys be boys, a 5, 6-year-old kid should want to conquer the day, should want to run and be full of energy, be full of life and vibrancy. They shouldn't just want to sit for a few hours. That must be like torture to them. I think that's a big reason why in the public school setting, why a lot more women go to college than men. Because it doesn't seem like it's a very fit system for many young boys, perhaps even most, to be the most successful. And that's why it's good to get your kids into sports at a young age. Do things where they can have that outlet for that energy. But just to think that these labels like ADHD were thrown around like all over the place. And now the big thing is spectrum disorders and stuff. You hear that more than ADHD now. But to get into where this connects with the video is I've seen a big conflation between being a strong man, being masculine, and being toxic and weak. Those are two completely different things. And we shouldn't punish or look down upon or disregard strong men who have been the people holding up society, in particular the United States of America, since its inception. We shouldn't demonize that. We should celebrate it, if anything. You look at how many countless brave men went to fight for their country in World War II. That is something that should be celebrated. There was a movement a few years ago, I'm sure you guys all remember, this whole thing with the toxic masculinity stuff, which they're right in that toxic masculinity shouldn't be celebrated. It should be called out, and it's wrong. But keep this in mind. A toxic man is someone who's abusive. And abusive in an actual sense, not just some fake allegations, because I'll go into that later in this video. A toxic man is someone who's manipulative, someone who is a backstabber, someone who sets people up, someone who swindles people, someone who scams people. That is a toxic man. That is not a real man. And I've just seen a big conflation between the two, because it almost seems like just any form of masculinity in general is being looked down upon and being suppressed in a way. They're not wanting boys to grow up to be men. It's very bizarre. And I've said before that this is not a political channel, but this is not a political point. But even a lot of the gender neutrality stuff. When I graduated in 2016, there was a little bit of it, but I've heard there's a lot more of it now. To where they're telling kids about you can choose your gender and the gender neutrality. Now, the reality is, look, no matter how you feel about that, men and women are biologically different. That is a fact. Even a 5-year-old knows they have a mother and a father, and they are different. Men have different bone structures than women, higher red blood cell counts, different hormones, a very wide array of different hormonal balances and stuff, a very wide array of things. So we shouldn't shun or suppress any of those. And again, I'm saying this too. There's a lot of women who are who feel out of place in today's society because of pushes like this. And if that's what someone wants to do when they're older, it doesn't bother me. But again, that shouldn't be something that's pushed to youth in this country to make them feel confused and out of place. 'Cause let's also remember this. It's hard enough being a kid growing up in modern day with all the social media and everything. People already feel out of place. They already feel insecure, many of them. The last thing they need is more things to just throw a pipe bomb and spiral it even more and tell them that all this stuff about their gender. There are things that men excel at, and there are things that women excel at. But you shouldn't suppress either one. But I see more of it towards men. Much more of it towards men. A strong man is someone who's stoic. A strong man is someone who stands up and calls things out when needed. Someone who supports their family, the people in their circle. Someone who has their best interest. A strong man is someone where if your parents, when they're elderly, if they're sick, is going to care for them. A strong man is someone where if their brother or friend gets in some altercation, unless it's they're doing and it's foolish, over something foolish, but in a general sense, they're going to have their back. They're not going to be conniving and backstabbing and saying, oh, whose side can I be on to benefit the most? None of that people-pleasing stuff. That's not a strong man. Strong men need to be celebrated in society. As I mentioned about countless men over the decades that have fought and died fighting for this country, for your own freedom. Additionally, look at a lot of these jobs, the hard physical labor, men in the sewers, men doing manual work, coming home with calluses, damaging their bodies, having back problems, knee problems, to support their family and keep society afloat, especially when it comes to things like infrastructure. That should be celebrated. I see it even more damaging, as I mentioned, for the youth, because I myself have talked about in previous videos growing up and feeling out of place, growing up and not feeling very confident myself and not having much direction. And part of that was because I didn't know how to be a real man when I was younger. I would hold grudges. I would overreact over the stupidest things. I had no real sound emotional regulation. I wasn't looking at things at a calculated, logical approach. And that kind of behavior is negative and just is full of drama. And that's not normal, healthy. I didn't even know how to have proper friendships or relationships. So we need young men to not be suppressed with being themselves and being masculine. Again, we should celebrate masculine behavior. We should celebrate strong men who keep society afloat. And as I mentioned, before someone watches and thinks, oh, this, no, I'm saying this too. There are things that women also excel at that they serve roles as well, as men do. When it comes to the subject of marriage, I see this as even more damaging because a lot of the time the polarities are so off, especially when it comes to dynamics and stuff like that. I myself have gone on a few dates recently over the past few months to a year. And it just seems like things are way different now in terms of masculine and feminine behavior. Now, before I went to college, when I was really active on dating apps and stuff like that, there was a little bit of that, but it wasn't as bad 5 years ago. It seems like nowadays things are just kind of bizarre, to put it, I guess, kind of bluntly. But when it comes to marriage, I'm someone who always valued the idea of marriage. Someone who always thought that a man and a woman coming together and having a kid and raising the kid in a household with both families in the home is an amazing thing. But it seems like nowadays you see all this influx and arguing and fighting and stuff like that, and no one knows how to handle it. I think I've talked about this previously, but the divorce rate for first-time marriages is like 50%, and for second-time marriages it goes up to even more, close to 60%. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is completely ridiculous. And here's where it connects into my point with this video. With the issues, a lot of young men are growing up in single-parent households, especially in single-mother households. I myself went to a middle school where there was a lot of students being bussed in from other areas, a lot of areas that were less financially abundant, where there was a lot more poverty. And I had a lot of people I knew who grew up in single parent households, where a lot of them didn't even have any connection to their father at all. So they didn't have a male figure to look up to unless the mother had a stepfather or something. But they didn't have their biological father in their life. They need a male role model. Now, an issue I see with that is in society, a lot of the people in the limelight, a lot of the men in the limelight, in terms of celebrities and stuff, in terms of maybe what's popular, a lot of these figures are not very good, strong male role models, I'll be honest. Now, I'm not saying there's not those out there. You could do a little bit of digging and find good role models. But in terms of a general sense, you don't see a whole lot of that. You see, quite frankly, a lot of what I talked about previously, the weak men. The ones that they've conflated with being strong and masculine. You see a lot more of that. I think that's where the confusion is. I've heard people talk about also there being a big rise in narcissists. I've heard some people say there's more narcissistic men. I've heard some people say there's more narcissistic women. Now, I've seen throughout my life about an equal amount of both, maybe a little bit more women. But let's keep this in mind. A lot of narcissistic men are men who have gone through trauma and don't know how to outlet that trauma. They don't know how to control or use it. They don't know how to regulate their emotions. So they want to sabotage everyone else and see everyone else do bad. Where as a man, you need to be logical and know this. Every single one of us has gone through trauma and loss. Every single man has gone through it. But as men, we have to persevere. I mean, let's not disregard it at all. There's men that put up with a lot of stuff, but a lot of the time they fight their battles in silence. So, with that, having a society of men or young adults or young men that are going to be suppressed and said, no, do not exhibit any masculine behaviors at all, you're asking for trouble. It's just going to create something that's completely destructive and not good for the overall well-being. And a lot of the time, too, I've heard a lot of women complaining, too, which I think that there's faults for the way women act. I think there's reasons why for Gen Z and millennials, the marriage rates and just rates of people in general having relationships is so low, or is so much lower than previous generations. And it's partly because of stuff like this, which that's one piece of the puzzle. I mean, there's a perfect storm of a bunch of stuff right now. But to me, it almost just seems like these women secretly deep down at a primal level, they know that they would be happier if they had been in a traditional relationship with a man where they act feminine. But it's just people are trying so hard now to push and just shun that. And again, that's why you see all these things falling apart. That's why you see the alarming rates in these statistics in America. It's just so bizarre to me. And in all honesty, if I have kids, which I do plan, I hope to have kids down the line, and I hear that this kind of stuff is being pushed in the schools, I don't know what I'm going to have to take them out and take them to private school. I don't know. But I've talked to people I know who have kids, people who are older than me that have kids in middle school and high school. And they've told me some of the stuff that the kids have said that they've heard in the classroom, and it is just unbelievable. Unbelievable, the stuff being pushed. The stuff to degrade even the idea of being a man, traditionally masculine, strong man. Toxic man is not someone who goes to the gym or takes care of themselves, or that's not at all. A weak man is someone who is destructive. And again, that is what should be called out. Like, I'm not going to make it sound like a woman shouldn't divorce a guy if he's abusive and toxic. Of course. Of course. But when it comes to the divorce stuff, an overwhelming majority of the time, it's women engaging in the divorce. I've heard very crazy circumstances that have led to even fathers not seeing the kid over lies, over fraud. It's fraud is what it is. You're making false accusations. But this would be better even for the women overall. Because the men, if the men lose their way, the women are going to lose their way. I mean, even just the OF stuff and all this stuff is just so ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous how off the dynamics and the polarity are. But I still see there being hope. And I don't like to make videos that are just, saying how problematic things are, because I think there's always a solution. And I do see some hope. I do see men, I've seen it, although slowly, starting to kind of gain their masculinity back. I've been seeing more of that. I've been seeing more people just walking away from the destructive stuff and be like, we're not happy. We're not going to be happy. We don't want to be miserable in our life. We don't want to be miserable down the line. So I think a lot of men are starting to kind of stand up, is what it seems like. And that at least makes me remain hopeful and optimistic for the future. But that doesn't change the fact that there needs to stop being the conflating of the two, of a weak man and a strong man. The strong man is the one that should be celebrated, even glorified perhaps. And the sooner people realize that, the better things are going to get. But let me know your thoughts, guys. I personally, as I mentioned, I graduated in 2016. Things were already pretty wild in terms of what was being pushed in the the public schools. Which again, I'm not anti-college or anti-school. I think that it's good to know fundamentals of math, science, literature. It's good to know those things, but stick to that. There doesn't need to be this extra agenda. I really don't see what place that really serves in a school setting. I think it's quite frankly pretty inappropriate. But that's just my thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for viewing. Have a great rest of your day.